keep an eye on the program, where the various activities are going on. That was a great morning, I thought. That was a real blessed time together of worshiping and praying and opening the scriptures together. Colin was a real blessing to us, definitely. As he was alluding to, he has spent many years planting churches. It's something he carries in his heart, and he's done it, not just carried it in his heart. He's put action to his passion, and that's something that we, as a family of churches, we've been involved with, obviously, for many years as well. We do want to just grab hold afresh of a heart for church planting, so that's partly also why we wanted to have Colin with us today. So I'm just going to give another 30 seconds, and then I'm going to ask Colin to come up. Do come and grab a chair closer forward if you're planning on staying with us. It's going to be a second seminar at 2:15. So we're going to do one seminar now for half an hour or so, then a second one after for half an hour or so as well. Wonderful. Colin, can I invite you up? I don't need to introduce you this time. I'll let you go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, just going to crack on. I always feel like you should never title a seminar about church planting, because the people you want in the room, so you want another thing, don't you? A question that just tricks people to get into the room, and then I'm only joking. No, I am very passionate about church planting. But I tell you what I'm as passionate about, which is churches growing and sending. Because I think, and when I say growing, sometimes when you're sending, it can be standing still, but you are growing. So, this is just a general starter, really. The church congregation I'm in Manchester is it got up to about 50 people, 60 people. Then we started, the medic who started a congregation for us was in that congregation. And when I say he took, we gratefully let him have probably 6 or 8 of the movers and shakers in the congregation. And the reality is, you take a group like that out, there's a hole, isn't there? And I think some of the challenges we have is the faith and belief of how do you almost need to replant sometimes. I don't mean you start again, but there's the energy to get a new group of people in. And I think that's another talk, okay? But I think it's probably very applicable to a lot of us in here, is the faith and the ability to send a few people and to be able to regather. And, it's taken a while, but, we've got now a third of our congregation is non-white, which is absolutely fantastic. One of our key preachers and worship leaders, Indian. I guess what I'm trying to say is, when we talk about church planting, part of the cost and also the delight, and I want to put the delight higher than the cost, is the local church that's involved with it. And I think, we spend a lot of time helping our congregations to rebuild and re-energize and regather, and when people are going. So anyway, that's slightly the talk, but there's going to be some questions at the end. So if you want to, that in a sense, that would just feed a few questions, because you can't talk about one without the other, in my humble opinion. Why should I care about church planting? I'm just going to do 3 little headings, or 4 headings. The first heading is this: it's the Sunday school answer. Because Jesus did it. Okay? Why should we care about church? Because Jesus did about it. And the kind of verse for me that is kind of lives with me and has been kind of the crux of lots of what we're doing is in Mark 1:35. And there, Jesus is praying. He's gone early in the morning, he's praying, and Peter is legging it to him because fundamentally his house, or his mother-in-law's house, is inundated with crowds of people who have come from the whole region. Think of Oxfordshire. It's like suddenly word has got in that Jesus is here. And overnight, crowds come. And Peter's there with his mother-in-law and no Jesus. So he goes, and I mean, it's the worst scenario, isn't it? You're visiting preacher that everybody's come, and this is not just a visiting preacher, this is the Lord Jesus Christ, has gone. And so he gets to Jesus. You can imagine him panting, and he's literally begging him. He said, later, Simon and Peter and the others went out to find Jesus, and when they found him, they said, everybody is looking for you. I mean, we pray that this would happen in all your market towns in Oxfordshire, don't we? It's like a mini renewal. And Jesus, come back. You know, mother-in-law's been healed. Lots of people have been healed the night before. And then Jesus just said this. But Jesus replied, we must go to the other towns as well. I will preach to them. That is why I came. What an answer to Peter. Peter's got renewal happening in his house, or at least his in-law's house. And Jesus is saying, my role is to go to every village and market town and town in the whole of Israel. And he didn't say this at the time, but I've only got 3 years to do it. That's why he said, I came. I honestly feel if we can get that in our spirit, it's a game changer. Because you can imagine all the needy people in Capernaum at that moment, the lame, the poor, they were there. And yet Jesus overrode that because he didn't care for them. He went back eventually. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But the reality is he had a goal that every village would have the physical presence of someone talking about the good news of the kingdom of God. Why should we be involved in it? Because Jesus was involved in it. Okay. So end of story. Okay, that's just what it is. But there's a second reason. I'm just doing some quick ones and then some questions, but just because it makes Jesus glad, happy. How many of you want to make Jesus glad? Don't put your hand up if you're not careful. No, you can't do it. I'm dead. Put your hand up. Trick question this, because once you put your hand up, you're committed, okay? But literally, there was a moment where he knew he couldn't get there because he knew the cross was a beckoning. And his heart broke for all the villages and towns he couldn't get to. So he said that's when he started praying, Lord, send workers. And then he said to the 12, go in twos. And then he realized they're not going to do it. So 70 or 72 others, whichever translation you've got, he said the same thing too. So he multiplied himself out time and time again. So I think the 12 well-trained going, then others. Because he couldn't get the 12 people in 6 teams to make it, he got 30 teams. And when they were doing it, it says this. It says in Luke 10:21, he said, at that same time when these 70 came back, he said this, Jesus filled with joy of the Holy Spirit. And he said, "Oh, Father in heaven, thank you for hiding these from some and revealing it to others." My slight paraphrase there for quickness. Makes Jesus happy. Makes Jesus glad. I want to make Jesus glad. These are Jesus reasons. Okay? And then the third thing, because Jesus told us to do it, which is where most people start. But actually, he started by doing it, by rejoicing that others were on doing it. And then he gave that great commission, go into all the world. So why should we church plant? Well, there's a ton of reasons. I'm giving you 3 Sunday school reasons. Okay? Jesus did it. And I think when we're in just normal run-of-the-mill life, and lots of you are in that, and especially when you've laboured a long time, and you know, in Oxfordshire, etc. I understand I do a lot of work in Peak District and in some of the poorer parts of Manchester, which it's hard work. And when you've gathered, you're exhausted. And even when 1 or 2 people go, it's like gutting. Do you know what I mean? It's just, but to know actually Jesus faced this. He faced it and he did it. So they're kind of 3 very simple things, which I think hopefully will just keep you motivated. And then, you know, there's the obvious ones as well. And I said, these are just, I'm going to be asked 1 or 2 questions, but I thought I'd just put this down. It's one of the biggest personal growth scenarios that you'll be in. No doubt about that. That if you go, you have to find God. And if you send people, you have to find God. Genuinely, I've seen, and for me, you know, your prayer life goes up. Everything goes up when you're on the front line. It's just no doubt about it. You know, you can't just kind of freewheel. You can't take yourself out of gear and just let it just trundle along downhill. You actually got to be engaged. And so, you know, the personal growth, and I've seen that. We've trained 100 preachers. Last year, I think, Tom, our preaching guru was telling me, I think we had 40-something different preachers in our congregations, because we're all the time knowing we've got to keep training, upskilling, giving opportunity. Because every time we start a new site, they need the preachers, and where they've come from need the preachers. Worship teams were doing exactly the same. You lose all your worship leaders, you got 1 12-string guitarist who's 106. Because your 2 trendy ones have just gone. Tim Simmons, who was with you, and some of you would have heard him. It's a joke, but it's not a joke. In September, his big prayer is, give me 6 drummers. Every September, God, I want drummers. Because he wants a good beat. He wants, and fundamentally, the more things you start, you need tons of drummers. What a great drummer this morning. Good young guy. You know, we had a 12-year-old that we encouraged to go and do drum lessons, because he's the only one that had any rhythm in one of our songs. He's a great drummer now. But he went to the message, they taught him how to drum. Do you understand? What I'm trying to say is, it's a personal growth for tons of people. Is that okay? Just a little bit of, do you want to ask me 1 or 2 questions? And if anyone else has got questions, just put your hand up and we'll. So I thought, give you a start and then we'll go from there. Is that okay? Are you with this?
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. I wanted to hear from Colin particularly. I've got 1 or 2 questions I can launch Colin's way. Has anyone... John, he's there already. It'd be great if I have some of our questions. I'll go to John and then to Sue. Just come and take the mic, actually, John.
You touched on this at the start, I think, with talking about some of the challenges. In your book, you mentioned about the rip effect.
Yes.
I wonder, what things do you do to try and mitigate or or make that as minimal as possible, that the effect of the church that sends and people are a bit hurt and how do you handle that?
Okay, so that means John Wimber, I got this from John Wimber years ago, and he basically said if like 10, I don't know what number he used, but just for instance, if 10 people go from your church, it probably affects 100 people. So friendships that they have and their kids have and etc. actually rips relationship. And they all say, we'll keep in touch, and then 6 months later, because you keep in touch on Sundays often, in reality, don't you? You know, when, you know, there's not much time. And so Wimber talks about this rip effect. And what that does, it destabilizes the sending church. And actually, he would say, and I've seen this, if you do it too often, you just stall. You know, so how do you mitigate that? Just put that question in context. First of all, don't send too many. Ones and twos. We did, I think, 6 or 8 for this one I've just talked about in Reddish. That was a hard gig. So first of all, you know, be intentional and do it. Second thing is, where we do have a number going, we put, if I was you, okay, this is where I would then step in and help the local. Does that make sense? So sometimes we think, so my 2 roles, apart from annoying people, if on a new plan, I go and sit there all the time. I free my evenings up, and then I do nothing apart from pray, and all I do is smile. And when there's nobody there and just me, I could say I'm a warm body in the room, at least someone's turned up. And I bring faith and patience. So that's what I do, and actually that's how growth comes, because I bring my faith in with the Pioneers' faith, and I do exactly the same, and our team now do exactly the same with the church that's sent. Does that make sense? So we intentionally put resource in. So we have a kind of 12 staff or something like that, but actually their roles, lots of them, are to reinforce. So most of the church planting, and so I think 3 of our site leaders are non-staff. They're in the marketplace and run. So I'm just giving you a few tidbits. But part of it is taking it seriously on both ends and really helping a local to and it's not a rebuild, that's an overstatement, but it's actually helping bring energy, which means, so is this okay? It means more visiting preachers, for instance. So people so sometimes the new thing gets all the interest and the existing doesn't. So that's what I'm saying. So for us, we would put one of our best Bible teachers. It's exactly what Tom, who runs all our theology school, he would spend more time in a church that sent people sometimes. Does that make sense? Because he's bringing energy, he's helping the local feel bigger team. So, yeah.
It's brilliant. Thanks, Colin. Acknowledging the effect on the sending church is really interesting. I think Sue had a question. Should we go there?
Yeah. I could go into more detail, but just as a...
It's similar, but not quite the same. So how, before you send and before you church plant, how do you sow in to a church the expectation and that later on people are going to be leaving? So how do you raise the expectation that church planting is a good thing rather than just a personal loss?
You just do it. I mean, you do it and try and see everybody win. I mean, that's the honest truth. Because it's hard to conceptually get it. I can preach this morning, simple words, but it can raise a bit of faith. The reality is, the thing that really lasts is a church that has actually sent a couple of people and something's happening with the people that sent, and they're surviving without them. Does that make sense? So the best way, always I feel, is actually doing it It's a bit like, I always think marriage prep is pretty rubbish. Everybody does it. Because you do kind of 6 sessions before the marriage. I think you should do 2 before and about 10 afterwards. You know, after the first 2 months, then you have real conversations, don't you? Sorry, that's probably undermined a few people, but it's the same kind of theory. Do you understand what I mean? It's like when you're in it, if you can then help people be successful. So a bit of pre, but in the main, get some wins. That's simple, but it's not as simple as that, but it's...
Any other questions? I'm going to go over here, one here, sir, and then behind.
It's in the afternoon, so I tend to be a bit kind of blasé.
Just a question. Would it not be better to try and go out and enlarge your own church before you attempt to go out and plant a church somewhere else? Because where churches are, I guarantee there's about 99% of the population around that church that don't go to that church.
Oops,
now, you've already got a church there. So surely it's a lot easier. You can practice church planting with the church you've got by going out and trying to get more people in. And then when you've succeeded in that, and that's coming, then that's giving you the foundation to do it somewhere else. Is that not a better idea?
No. Sorry. I always say to people who come to ask my advice in an afternoon, you just get it not well. It's always a bit more blunt. I mean, the answer is yes and no, of course, but let me just give a couple of reasons why. First of all, I think Jesus, you know, if anybody was going to do it, Jesus would have done it at Capernaum, first of all. That's why I used that illustration. Right? He had the whole region coming to him. Why leave it there? Because he wanted to demonstrate to his apostles and the 70 others and the others that there's a missional expectation in the heart of God for going. Okay? So that's why I started there. So that's my first thing. My second thing is so that's a kind of biblical thing. The second is actually just a kind of sociological, I don't know if that's the right word. The normal sized church in America and the UK is 68 people, give or take. So the majority of churches are that size. Strange, isn't it? And I think there's a reason for that. I think that works. I think pastorally it works, friendship it works. So, you know what I mean? There are few churches relative to the whole, okay, who get above the 120. Now, for me, I go with the flow. So I decided 30 years ago, I don't think I've got the gift to get it through 100. I think I'm one of the average. Genuinely, that was my, you know, and I mean, I've run a movement, so I could argue I'm belittling myself, but actually, that I'm not good at. I've got other people that are much better. So for me, multiplying the 70s has been the reason I do it. So I've gone with the flow, if I can use that. So they're my two amongst 1,000 other reasons. It's still, in some circumstances, the right thing to do to grow and build. So please don't mishear what I'm saying. But that's the reason I am much more committed to personally multiplying 70s, you know, and getting them working together as a, you know, like you've done here, big crowd. So I don't know if we could have a debate all afternoon, do you understand what I mean? So I appreciate, and I'm trying to just for time and just to be a bit provocative, because that's basically what I'm here for. Is that okay? So that's my opinion, for what it's worth.
A few more minutes. Should we have a couple of questions here? We just need it for the recording, we do, I'm afraid.
I'll probably get shot for these answers.
Yeah.
So
Colin, I want to come back to you on, if you'll excuse the expression, the 4-letter word. which was sent. Number of times you've talked about sent. And my question is it always necessary for the local church to look for a group of 2 or 3 married couples to move to a plant, even if it's maybe just 8, 10, 12 miles away? Or is there a raiding party type model that could also work?
In terms of?
In terms of a plant. So, if you've got a group of 6, 8, 10 in your local church who have a hunger for a plant, and the plant is perhaps just 8, 10, 12 miles away, is it possible to do a plant on a raiding party type basis?
In and out?
Yeah. Or is it always necessary to have 2, 3, 4 couples, families that would actually move to where the plant is?
I think it's a bit of everything.
Okay.
The answer is, so, we have people, a lot of our church plant sites and stuff, start with a group of people. After the first 2 years, it's invariably not the same group of people. So numbers of them have done it and then actually miss where they came from. So, but we live very comfortably with that. And some people give themselves to doing it. For me, when we started, I started in South Manchester with and then 30 people, we started our next one. And I felt God speak to me in a prayer meeting to do it. Lots of people thought I was mad. But then I said, and there was a young girl who basically was in the prayer meeting. I said, could we start in your house? It was 30 miles away in Bolton. She said, yeah. So I thought, God's speak. She said, I would do it. I said, you invite 1 or 2 people and I'll bring a carload. And literally that's how, so we had a carload of raiders. Every week I took a carload. That church took years to get properly going. It's bought its own building now. It's grown, it's into hundreds, it's planted a church. But the reality is it was a mixture. So simplistically.
We got just a few more minutes to go. Why don't Dee give us a question here in green?
You talked this morning about one of your church plants not succeeding in it. You had to shut it down. How do you decide when to shut a church plant down?
Read my next book. No, I mean, that is a big one. I've done there's a thing, we have a thing called the Broadcast website, and I've just literally been videoed. I don't often get to do this, and it's called Challenges of Missional Leadership. It should be going on the Broadcast website. It's about 8 15-minute bids, and one of them is this, alluded to this. I think it's a difficult one. In the main, it's faith and patience, okay? So we stick with it as much as we can. In the end, sometimes either through bad decisions, leadership, you know what I mean? In the end, you have to make the decision. It's not going to work. But for us, that is ultra rare. And it tends to happen when I mentioned this morning that I'd moved on by then. So how do we do it? We do it as well as we can. And we get as much buy-in as we can. But we try to do it as rare as we can. Our goal always is, how can we make this work? That's our default. But Jesus did say, if it don't work, move on to the next village and don't get stained by the disappointment and the rejection. Get your feet like this. So Jesus prepared them, and it was mainly preparing their hearts to cope with the disappointment. It's a very quick all these questions demand a much fuller conversation, okay?
Thanks, Colin. A few more minutes, like 1 or 2 last questions. Trevor at the back.
Hi there. Just wondering, you're saying the average church is 68 people, and our church is about that sort of size. I'm just wondering how you manage within your churches. We have a few young people who are quite lost, and we've got quite a lot of older people in our church. How do you managed to work with the youngsters to get them envisioned and growing and get that sense of community that they need and the input they need when everybody else is so stretched doing everything else that's required in a church with so few people?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. It's even more a challenge in rural, and I class this as rural when you come from a city of 2.8 million. So, yeah, no, but what I'm trying to say is you're rural in your spread. So there's no grass between one congregation we've got to another. That's what I mean by rural. So for us, we work hard at our teenage work. So we invest in it across. So we try and serve well. And for instance, we realize we've got a few scattered of 16 to 18-year-olds. We have a Sunday night meeting with a service at 5 for students. We've just started a work for them, and their parents have to do a lot of legwork. They have to get them there. So a lot of it is educating the parents. They've got to do it. And we put it, you know, like I think it was Domino's Pizzas last week. So we say whatever it takes to make this a good time for that little group of people, we will do. So I think one of the things of being in a network is you basically maximize. Now, it's easier in a city than it is here, so I'm conscious. But that's, for me, the beauty of network. But yeah, it's a whole philosophy of kind of, yeah. So again, that's a simple answer, you know, to a big question. But I think at the heart of it, if that makes sense. And also, we do mission trips, and we take that group. We do our Bible week, you know, the youth Bible weeks. It used to be Soul Survivor and New Day, which we do. We really invest in those big occasions where we can take teenagers from across. Does that? Yeah. So we work hard to help make the best experience possible, and the ease of pressure on the local pastors and team. John? Yeah. So they've got energy for others. That's simplistically.
Great, thanks. Final question to Chris. You can take my mic, Chris.
The narrative seems to be that church planting is for married couples and young families. Where's the place for single people in church planting?
Oh, wow, that's a bad narrative.
Yeah.
Okay. My first church, when I went to Manchester, so that was my first church plant. That was 2 married couples did that. Second one was a single girl. Fourth one was a single lad. They married each other effectively in the end. The 3 stories I told this morning, single girl, Spanish speaker, single guy. Both of them planted, and actually both the single guys just got married, and the single girl got married. So for me, singles are fabulous, and I hope I've not even portrayed that as I think, as Paul said, there's a massive, massive benefit. So numbers of our leaders, we train loads of single people to preach, to lead. I've just got a young guy, 24, just become one of our main leaders of one of our sites, single guy. Yeah, no, I mean, for us, it's heaven. Because married couples with kids, complicated.